In 1997, a man returned a VHS tape late. Blockbuster charged him $40. 28 years later, that man's company agreed to pay $82 billion to own one of Hollywood's oldest studios. That's the story you've heard. Here's the thing about that story. It might not be true. The myth Reed Hastings told this story for years. He'd rented Apollo 13 from Blockbuster, lost track of it, returned it weeks late, got hit with a $40 fine. And on the drive to the gym, embarrassed, a little annoyed, he had a thought. What if movie rentals worked more like a gym membership? One flat monthly fee, no late charges, no anxiety about the return date. It's a clean story, a human story, the kind of founding myth that gets reprinted in business textbooks and recited on conference stages. It's also, according to Netflix's actual co-founder, largely invented. So why does any of this matter? Because Netflix, from its very first day all the way to its biggest deal, has always understood something that most companies never figure out. The story you tell about yourself is as powerful as the product you sell. The late fee story wasn't just good PR. It was a positioning statement. It told the world exactly who Netflix was, and precisely who it had been built to destroy. Let's go back to where it actually started. The real origin, 1997. Silicon Valley is on fire. Amazon has just gone public. The internet is making people rich, or at least making them believe they're about to be. Every morning, Reed Hastings and Marc Randolph carpool together from their homes in Santa Cruz to a software company called Pure Atria in Sunnyvale. They spent every minute of that commute trying to figure out what to build next. Randolph had been watching what Amazon did to book selling. He was obsessed with the idea of being the Amazon of something, a massive, curated, home deliverable category. They brainstormed for weeks. Personalized shampoo, custom printed baseball cards, sporting goods, VHS tapes. VHS they immediately ruled out. Too expensive to stock, too fragile to ship. But then they heard about something new, a format barely available in America yet. A small, flat disc could hold an entire film, crystal clear picture. The DVD. They didn't have one to test. So they did what any sensible future billionaire would do. They mailed a music CD to Hastings' house in Santa Cruz, inside a thin greeting card envelope. No padding, no box. If it arrived in one piece, they had a business. The actual founding moment. The CD arrived at Hastings' door, unbroken, on time, intact. That moment, not a late fee, not a gym analogy, is a true founding of Netflix. A CD, a greeting card envelope, a commute on Highway 17. On August 29, 1997, Netflix was incorporated. 30 employees, 925 titles in the catalog. Nearly every DVD that existed in the United States at that moment. The company's very first rental was Beetlejuice. Tim Burton would probably appreciate that. No late fees. Flat monthly subscription. DVDs delivered to your door in a red envelope. Keep them as long as you like. It was simple. It was different. And it was aimed like a dart at exactly one competitor. The meeting that changed everything. By the year 2000, Netflix was not winning. The dot-com bubble had burst. The company was burning through cash. Randolph and Hastings were doing the math. And the math was not mathing. They needed either investment or an exit. So they flew to Dallas, to the headquarters of Blockbuster, then the most powerful video rental company on earth. 9,000 stores, 60 million customers, an empire built on late fees, new releases, and the Friday night ritual of walking the aisles. Netflix had a proposal, a partnership. Netflix would run Blockbuster's online business. Blockbuster would promote Netflix in stores. Together, they'd own both the physical and digital future of home entertainment. The asking price for the whole arrangement, $50 million. John Antioco, Blockbuster's CEO, reportedly laughed. Not a polite boardroom chuckle. He found the idea genuinely funny. The notion that this small, money-losing DVD mail company posed any threat to his 9,000 store empire struck him as absurd. He passed. What happened next? Blockbuster would later try to launch its own DVD by mail service, Blockbuster Total Access. And in 2007, it was actually outperforming Netflix. Then Carl Icahn, the activist investor on Blockbuster's board, forced out the CEO who built it. The program was gutted. By 2010, Blockbuster had filed for bankruptcy. Netflix, that same year, was worth $4 billion, 80 times what Antioco had laughed at. The $50 million decision that cost Blockbuster everything. The button by 2007, Netflix had reached 5 million subscribers. The DVD business was working. The myth had proven itself, whether or not the myth was real. But Reed Hastings had never been interested in DVDs. Not really. The company wasn't named DVD by mail. It was named Netflix. Netflix. He'd been pointing at the internet from the beginning. In January 2007, the same month Apple launched the iPhone, Netflix quietly added a small button to its website. Watch now. No download. No disc. No red envelope. Just press play instantly on your computer. 1,000 titles available on day one. Nobody wrote much about it. The technology press was too busy covering the iPhone. But that button, that one small button, was the moment everything changed. The moment a DVD company became a streaming company. The moment a startup became a threat to Hollywood itself. What no one knew yet was that the next 5 years would nearly destroy it. Coming up, Netflix tries to split itself in two, loses almost 1 million subscribers overnight, then bets $100 million on a political drama nobody asked for. The disruptor becomes the disrupted Qwikster, House of Cards, and the streaming wars. The years Netflix nearly lost Qwikster, the $40 million mistake. By the summer of 2011, Netflix was on top of the world. 24 million subscribers. Stock price at an all-time high of over $300 a share. Reed Hastings was on the cover of Fortune. The company had beaten every competitor that had tried to copy it. It had survived the dot-com crash, survived the Blockbuster counterattack, survived 100 smaller rivals who tried and failed to replicate the red envelope model. Then, Reed Hastings made the single worst decision in the company's history. In July 2011, Netflix announced it was splitting its DVD and streaming plans into 2 separate subscriptions. What had been $10 a month for both services would now cost $7.99 for each, nearly $16 combined, a 60% price increase, announced mid-recession with no warning and almost no explanation. The reaction was immediate. Customers were furious. The blog post announcing the change became one of the most commented posts in internet history, and almost none of the comments were supportive. Then, 2 months later, Hastings made it worse. On September 18th, he posted a blog titled An Explanation and Some Reflections. He opened with, "I messed up," then spent the rest of the post announcing that the DVD business would be spun off into a separate company, with a separate website, separate billing, separate login, separate recommendations. The new company would be called Qwikster. The name alone caused a news cycle. Saturday Night Live mocked it within the week. Customers didn't just complain, they cancelled. In one quarter, Netflix lost 800,000 US subscribers. Its stock, which had been trading at over $300, collapsed to $65, a drop of nearly 80% in 4 months. 23 days after announcing Qwikster, Hastings killed it. It had existed for less than a month. What went wrong? And what didn't? Here's the thing most retrospectives miss. Hastings wasn't wrong about the direction. He was wrong about the speed. He understood that the DVD business was dying and streaming was the future. He was right. He just tried to move faster than his customers could follow. The strategy was correct. The execution was catastrophic. The lesson Netflix learned from Qwikster shaped everything that came next. Hastings later said of that period, and this is a quote worth remembering, "There is a difference between moving quickly, which Netflix has done very well for years, and moving too fast, which is what we did in this case." The question now was, how do you come back from something like that? The $100 million bet. You come back by doing something nobody in Hollywood had ever done before. You come back by using data as a creative weapon. By 2013, Netflix had been watching its subscribers for years. Not just what they watched, but how they watched. When they paused, when they rewound, what they abandoned after 3 minutes, and what they binged in a single sitting. What genre they searched at 11 p.m. versus 7 a.m. The data was extraordinary in its granularity. And in that data, the algorithm found something interesting. There was a specific Venn diagram of Netflix users, a meaningful overlap between people who had watched the original British version of House of Cards, people who watched movies directed by David Fincher, and people who had watched films starring Kevin Spacey. And crucially, those who watched Fincher films were among the most likely to finish them in a single sitting. The conclusion? An American adaptation of House of Cards, directed by Fincher, starring Spacey, would work. Not might work, would work. The data said so. The unprecedented decision Netflix didn't ask to see a pilot. They didn't commission a test episode. They wrote a $100 million check for 2 full seasons, 26 episodes, before a single scene was filmed. No network in history had done this. It was the moment an algorithm greenlit a major television production, and it changed the entire industry's idea of what a streaming service could be. When House of Cards launched, all 13 episodes of the first season dropped at midnight all at once. It brought in over 2 million new US subscribers in a single quarter. It didn't just recover the ground Netflix had lost in the Qwikster disaster. It announced something far larger. Netflix was no longer a place you went to watch other people's content. It was a studio, the binge-watching model, the data-driven green light, the full season drop. Every single one of these is now industry standard, and every single one of them started with House of Cards. The streaming wars begin. For most of the 2000s, Netflix had something no competitor could match: a head start. While the studios debated whether streaming would kill their business, Netflix was building the future. By 2019, it had over 160 million global subscribers and was spending $15 billion a year on content. Then, in a single quarter, between October 2019 and January 2020, everything changed. Disney Plus launched. Apple TV Plus launched. Peacock was announced. HBO Max was coming. Amazon doubled down. Every studio that had been licensing content to Netflix suddenly looked at those revenues, looked at Netflix's subscriber numbers, and made the same calculation. We can do this ourselves. They started pulling their content back. Friends left Netflix. The Office left Netflix. The MCU, Star Wars, all going to Disney+. The library that had defined Netflix's offering in the early years was being dismantled piece by piece. The company that had been the disruptor was now being disrupted. And yet, and this is the part of the story that gets forgotten, Netflix survived it. Better than survived. The password crackdown and the comeback. In 2022, Netflix reported its first subscriber loss in a decade. The stock dropped by over 70% in a single year. Analysts declared the streaming era over. Critics said the password sharing era had caught up with them. The narrative was collapse. Then Netflix did something that every analyst said would accelerate that collapse. They cracked down on password sharing. You want to use Netflix? You pay for Netflix. No more splitting an account across 3 households. No more your cousin in another city using your login. The response from subscribers was furious. The internet declared they'd cancel en masse. Twitter, at the time, was full of promises to delete the app the moment the crackdown hit their account. You know what actually happened? The counterintuitive result. In 2023, the year of the password crackdown, Netflix added 29 million new subscribers. Its best performance since the COVID lockdowns of 2020. The password sharers, who said they'd cancel instead, signed up for their own accounts. The stock recovered. The narrative of collapse quietly disappeared from the business press. By 2024, Netflix had 260 million subscribers in 190 countries. It was the most watched entertainment platform on earth. It had survived the dot-com crash, the Qwikster disaster, the streaming wars, and the password crackdown. The company that had been built to disrupt Hollywood had become the most powerful force in Hollywood. Which brings us to the part of this story that's still happening. Right now. As you're watching this video. Coming up, the deal that rewrites a century of Hollywood history. And the question that nobody is asking about what it means for Netflix's soul. The Empire Strikes $82.7 billion, Warner Brothers, and the question nobody is asking. December 2025. The announcement on December 5th, 2025, Netflix announced it had agreed to acquire the studios, TV networks, and streaming division of Warner Brothers Discovery. The deal included HBO, HBO Max, Warner Brothers Pictures, DC Comics, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, The Sopranos, Friends, Casablanca, The Wizard of Oz, a century of the most valuable entertainment IP on the planet. The price? $82.7 billion. All cash. Ted Sarandos got on a call with Wall Street analysts that morning. He knew how it would land. He opened by saying, and this is a direct quote, "I know some of you are surprised we are making this acquisition. We have been known to be builders, not buyers." The line that defines this entire story, builders, not buyers. That had been Netflix's identity for 28 years. They built streaming. They built original content. They built the binge model. They built a global platform from a greeting card envelope and a music CD on a California highway. And now they were buying the oldest studio in Hollywood. Think about what that library means for a moment. Warner Brothers Pictures has been making movies since 1923. Over a century of content. Casablanca, Singing in the Rain, The Godfather. Wait, that's Paramount. But you get the point. The catalog Netflix is acquiring didn't just define Hollywood. It invented it. And Netflix, the company that mailed DVDs in red envelopes, was buying all of it. The bidding war. Hollywood goes to war with itself. Visual, Senate hearing room. David Ellison. Paramount logo, James Cameron, Ted Sarandos testifying. Washington, D.C., February 2026. The deal did not go uncontested. Days after Netflix announced the acquisition, Paramount Skydance, led by David Ellison, son of Oracle billionaire Larry Ellison, submitted a hostile counterbid, $108 billion, for the entire Warner Brothers Discovery Company, including the cable networks Netflix wasn't buying. The biggest hostile takeover bid in the history of the entertainment industry. It got messier from there. The United States Senate convened an antitrust subcommittee hearing. Ted Sarandos testified under oath. Republican Senator Mike Lee, who chairs the subcommittee, grilled him on the deal's impact on competition. The Justice Department launched its own review. The WBD board gave Paramount 1 week to submit its best and final offer, then rejected it. The shareholders voted on the Netflix proposal. Then Trump weighed in, saying any deal for Warner Brothers should include CNN. And then James Cameron wrote a letter. The Cameron Letter. February 10th, 2026. The director of Titanic, Avatar, and Terminator sent a letter to Senator Mike Lee arguing that a Netflix acquisition of Warner Brothers would be disastrous for the theatrical motion picture business. He cited Sarandos' previous remarks, calling the theater model an outdated concept, and warned that whatever promises Netflix made about theatrical windows, there was no mechanism to enforce them once the deal closed. Sarandos fired back immediately. On Fox Business, he called Cameron's letter part of a Paramount disinformation campaign. He said, "I'm particularly surprised and disappointed that James chose to be part of that machine." He revealed he had met with Cameron personally in December, laid out Netflix's 45-day theatrical commitment, and that Cameron, at the time, had seemed more excited to talk about the VR movie viewing glasses he was developing with Meta than about theatrical windows. Christopher Nolan said publicly he had very significant concerns about the deal. The International Union of Cinemas lobbied the European Commission. Theater owners testified before Congress. Netflix, the company that launched with 1,000 streaming titles and a Watch Now button, was now at the center of a Senate antitrust battle, a proxy war between billionaire families, and a public feud with the director of Titanic. The DVD company from Santa Cruz had become, somehow, the establishment. The irony at the center of everything. Here's the thing I want you to sit with for a moment. Netflix was founded explicitly to destroy the gatekeepers of entertainment. The whole premise, no late fees, no limited selection, no geographic restriction, no arbitrary theatrical window, was a rejection of the rules that Hollywood and its distribution partners had built over a century. Reed Hastings didn't want to work within the system. He wanted to replace it. And he did. Netflix disrupted video rental. It disrupted cable. It disrupted the weekly release schedule. It disrupted the pilot process. It disrupted everything it touched. And now, in the biggest single transaction in the history of entertainment, it is buying a 102-year-old studio. It is acquiring the archives, the intellectual property, the production infrastructure, and the distribution machinery of the very system it was built to dismantle. The disruptor has become the thing it disrupted. The number that closes the loop. In 2000, Netflix asked Blockbuster to acquire it for $50 million. Blockbuster laughed. In 2025, Netflix agreed to pay $82.7 billion to acquire Warner Brothers. That's the compounded return on one moment of arrogance, multiplied by 28 years of relentless execution. The late fee, real or invented, has compounded into $82.7 billion. The open question. There's a question nobody is really asking. In the middle of all the Senate hearings, and the hostile bids, and the James Cameron letters. What does Netflix mean when it owns Warner Brothers? The Netflix brand was built on a specific promise. More of what you want, less of what you don't. Cheaper, faster, on demand. No schedules, no gatekeepers. The algorithm knows what you like. We'll make more of it. But Warner Brothers is something different. Warner Brothers is Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, The Dark Knight, Casablanca. These aren't just titles in a catalog. They're cultural events. They're things that require a cinema, a release window, a shared cultural moment. They exist in opposition to the on-demand, algorithmic, infinite scroll model that Netflix perfected. The question of whether Netflix can be both things at once, the disruptor and the institution, the algorithm and the auteur, the infinite catalog and the cultural event, is the most interesting brand question in the history of the entertainment business. And we won't know the answer for years. But here is what we do know. In 1997, a man, maybe, got a $40 late fee from Blockbuster. Whether or not that's true, the story was useful. It gave Netflix an identity, an enemy, a reason to exist. We are the anti-Blockbuster. We are the future, and they are the past. In 2025, that same company paid $82 billion to become the most powerful gatekeeper in Hollywood. The late fee became an empire. The empire became the thing it killed. And somewhere in Dallas, in 2000, a man laughed. Netflix was built on one idea, that the gatekeepers of entertainment had gotten comfortable, that they'd stopped serving the audience and started serving themselves. Reed Hastings was right. He just didn't expect that 28 years later, the disruptor would be the one sitting behind the gate. The question worth asking now, is Netflix any different? Or did it just win the right to make the same mistake?